Brilliant. So, hello and welcome to episode number 4 of the Culture, EVP and Leadership podcast. Today has taken us to Trafford and Stockport College Group, otherwise known as TSCG. And today I'm with the principal and CEO, well now just CEO, James Scott. James, introduce yourself.
Hi, thanks for coming and welcome to TSCG and of course Stockport College where we are today. So I'm James Scott, as you say, the Chief Executive Officer of TSCG. I've been here about 13 years through many different changes we've been through, which I'm sure we'll touch on throughout the podcast. But no, welcome and thanks for inviting me on.
No, exciting times ahead. So today you're going to hear about why you should work here, what James's views are on leadership and why the culture of this college matters so much. So without further ado, we're going to get into it and we'll get kicking. So, you touched on there, you've been in further education for 13 years, but it's probably gone on longer than that. So how long have you been in FE for?
Well, TSCG, or Trafford College, as was, I started 13 years ago. But I've actually been in FE for the better part of 20 years. I started out as a student teacher at Olden College. Did my PGCE there after the first year. I was very fortunate to get offered a full-time job straight away. Yeah. And then as one does, climbs a greasy pole through various roles. So started out as a teacher, then as a project manager, then as a curriculum manager, then as assistant director, then as a member of the senior management team. And then of course 13 years ago, decided you can't get institutionalised if you stay in a place too long. Hint, maybe I've been here too long, 13 years, who knows? But then made the move to Trafford College, as was, which was fantastic actually, because I was born in Trafford, Stretford, and I actually went to Trafford College as a student. So in the day, full circle. Back in the day when I was a 16-year-old, there was actually two separate colleges, North Trafford College and South Trafford College. They were merged in sort of 2007 under Bill Moorcroft. But I went to North Trafford College, did my A-levels as a student. So to come back here and to lead the organisation, wow, it's fantastic.
For me, that's equilibrium, right? We have a beginning, a middle, and maybe not an end, but certainly
hopefully a period.
Not yet. Yeah, and that's a space to give back to the community. That's a chance to lead the community. And how did it start? So you said you started as a trainee teacher. So how did you get in as a trainee lecturer? What made you do that? What made you make that jump?
So the background was, I'd had so I'd been to university, done a degree in Russian of all things, was originally intending to go into the army, army intelligence. Most of my closest friends all went into the military. It's a running joke with them that I wimped out and ended up in education, not in defence. But that was the original intention. I did a degree in Russian and was looking to go into military intelligence. And of course, the Cold War ended. Weren't many jobs available. Maybe these days that's going to change.
You might have a job on your hands.
Had a young family and then took a bit of time out. But then I actually went and did a master's in English with the intention to go into teaching. Okay. So I didn't need many Russian teachers, of course, but obviously
not
English.
In the UK, but maybe in Russia.
Maybe in the future. Who knows? Maybe in the future. So I went wanted to go into English teaching. Did a master's degree. Really did well in a master's degree. Really enjoyed it, and then started a PhD. And midway through doing a PhD, I thought, do you know what I really need to do? I need to go and do a PGCE, because you get all these people lecturing in university and waffling at you for about 3 hours. But none of them have actually probably done a teaching qualification. So I thought, to add a real sort of string to my bow, to my CV, I'll do a PGCE alongside doing the PhD, because I was doing it part-time. And I just fell into FE. And something had to give, so I gave up the PhD halfway through. I actually thought, well, you're going to become the world's expert in something nobody is interested in, because you're becoming the world's expert, so it's a bit pointless. And therefore just ended up in the fabulous world of further education, and do not regret that for one moment.
Was there a moment, or was it someone mentioned? Because lots of people, when I talk about colleges, they go, what? I thought people were born bricklayers. I didn't know they trained to do that stuff. I was just like, no. Yeah, we have to teach people things, right? So when I talk about getting into FE, most people go, I don't know what you're talking about. So what was that inception moment where you were like, right, I'm going to go work at Olden College? Did someone mention it, or were you, because you were in higher education doing a PhD. So what led you to Olden?
So purely the student teacher placement. So as part, so I did the PGC at Huddersfield.
Yes.
And it's interesting because during the first few weeks of the course, when they sort you out with a placement, they said, "Do you live in Manchester?" I said, "Yeah." They said, Oh, so we don't really have many placements in Manchester because obviously it's Huddersfield in Yorkshire. And they said, Olden, is that in Manchester? I said, well, yeah, it's Greater Manchester. So I said, we've got some placements there. So I said, great, I don't mind where I'll go wherever. So I did the student-teacher placement at Olden College. And then, as I said, very fortunate at the end of that placement that there was a full-time job advertised, went for it and got it.
So by chance, because someone confused Greater Manchester, Oldham and Huddersfield and kind of got together, said, let's go to Olden College and give it a go.
That's one way of looking at it, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you've been in FE quite a while. How long have you been a leader in FE?
So when I was in my last sort of few years at Olden College, I was a director of curriculum, so part of the senior management team. So I would probably say, in terms of formal leadership, if you like, I'd probably say the better part of 15 to 16 years. So actually, the majority of my time in FE has been in a leadership role as opposed to teaching. That's how fast I sort of moved through different roles at Oldham College. And then when I started here at Trafford, I started as the assistant principal at the Altrincham campus, South Trafford College, as was actually replacing the role of Amanda Melton, who had moved on to be principal of Nelson and Colne College.
Yes, yeah.
So yeah.
Crazy, the shift. It proves that FE needs its leaders, right? Like good leaders in FE make serious and significant impact. So if you come in and you do a brilliant job, you've got the people talk about a lack of a progression route in FE, and I have to bang a drum almost constantly, is that FE is the theatre of dreams. Not an Old Trafford reference quite yet, but it is a place where you can come in, make an impact, learn and practice craft and be invested upon to get to the next steps. And that's shown in your career with people, you earning roles, right? Getting into director of curriculum, getting into an assistant principal, and then the rise now to a CEO. But what kept you motivated? What kept you in FE? Because there's a lot of change in that career. There's a lot going on in that period of time you were talking about, 20 years. Lots of things have changed. So why did you keep fighting?
I think the variety of it. No 2 days are the same, are they? There's never a dull moment in FE. I mean, it's challenging every single day, and then some. But you can never say you get bored. But ultimately, and I know this sounds a little bit maybe cliched, but one of the things I say to our colleagues here is we're all here for one reason: to transform lives for the better. That's what further education does,
Yep.
Because we are genuinely the sector that you can say all life is here. We work with everybody, no matter who you are, what stage of the journey you're on, what your background is. There is pretty much something in FE for you, and I call it the all things to all people. And sometimes that's challenging because there's real positives about being all things to all people, but it brings a lot of challenges with it. But would I change that? No, absolutely not. Because we genuinely do transform lives for the better. More, I think, than any other sector. And you'd expect me to argue that in FE, and I'm sure schools will say the same. I'm sure universities. But I genuinely think FE is that transformational, that sector. And that's why I love doing it.
I'd fight your cause as well on that one. I think many people that see the elements that colleges bring. So I know at points FE has been known as that not first choice. But actually, if you need a end-to-end catering to someone, right, pastoral, in the community, you need them to meet employers, you need them to study skills, you need to give them life skills, you need to give them anything, whatever they need, a safe place. That's colleges, and that's why colleges are traditionally in the community. We see them, and yours is a large one, it has lots of communities it serves, but they're where people need them most. And even we have the remote colleges, the agricultural ones, they are where they service the community. You don't typically find colleges in the middle of nowhere doing nothing unless it's the agricultural colleges require a lot of land. And that for me means that you really have got the place to meet the student where they are.
Yeah.
So you've been in FE a long time, you've been a leader for a long time. What's your bit of advice on someone looking to get into FE? Where do they go and what are they looking for?
I think the advice I would give anybody, first of all, looking to enter FE, is to say it isn't easy. You absolutely cannot dress it up. I've seen lots of campaigns out there which try and persuade people to do a bit of FE on the side, and it's all very well intentioned. Let's be honest, we've got a workforce crisis still, not as bad as it was a couple of years ago, but it's still very challenging, particularly in certain roles. to attract and retain talent. And I think campaigns that basically say, do FE as a side hustle, it's just not right, because it's a tough gig. It is a tough gig, especially if people coming into the sector who maybe are really knowledgeable and skilled in their particular sort of trade areas or their sort of skill areas, the pedagogical aspects of it, if you're talking about teachers, for example, being able to sort of teach and support and work with young people in particular, and of course adult learners, it is challenging. But my goodness, is it rewarding. There's no other job where you get to see the impact of what you do on, as I said earlier, transforming lives.
Real time, day to day. You see it from the first day they join until the last day when they leave the college to go on to whatever they do next. You see that in real time.
I saw that throughout my teaching career. I worked with some of the most difficult communities. I taught in the probation service. I taught in homeless centres. I was sat trying to teach people maths when they were watching the racing on the TV, and they were more interested in that. So then I started teaching them probability through betting and all that kind of stuff. It's you're working with some of the most disadvantaged, hard to reach communities, as you said earlier. The FE sector being seen, unfortunately, as that sort of second, third, or even last chance. So it is very tough, but it is so rewarding, and I think that for most people makes up for the challenges they face on a day-to-day basis. To see the journey of people that they start to engage with at the beginning of that college year or the beginning of that course through to the end of it is quite phenomenal and something to behold, really. So what I would say to anybody looking to progress in FE, and you mentioned earlier, didn't you, about the opportunities are there, and some people talk about the sort of toughness to progress through. The advice I would give to people is you have to make a choice. If you want to progress, you do have to be prepared to take on extra responsibility. The way I've always described it, and the way it was described to me by people who work with me and supported me through my career, was you always need to try and operate at the level above. Put yourself in the shoes of the role above. Manage upwards to people.
Upwards and downwards.
And some people, that isn't what they want to do, and I get that. For some people, it's like, you pay me to do this job, I am going to do this job. No problem with that at all. That's absolutely fine. But if you want to progress, I think you've got to be willing to take on that extra responsibility, to push yourself forwards, to see where things aren't working. I'll pick that up. I'll do that. I'll take on that. And that's how you get noticed. And that's how then people sort of champion you and support you to progress your career.
And you touched on the bit that was most important to me there, which is in FE, people will champion you. They will stand in your corner. They will cheer you along and say, yeah, thanks for spotting that out. We're here to help. Really appreciate that insight. We're here to do things. There's no space for moaning in FE. That's if you're just going to complain, I don't think you or I would want to hear about it. If you've got an idea and you think that's going to solve a problem, please, by all means, bring that to the table. Let us talk about it. And that's leadership. That's improving. And I think the phrase that I've used in my life is act as if. Now, that doesn't mean go bossing your colleagues about, but how's your leader working? What problems are they solving? What are they doing? How can you help them? And act as if you want to be there one day. Ask all the questions that you need. And that works in the same in private sector as in public sector. It does in a college. You've got all of this space in front of you, and in an environment that is geared around supporting people. How can you not? And I'm not saying we have a skills crisis in terms of lecturers. I don't want every lecturer to suddenly become a leader. But master your craft in FE. Come and master what you do. And I take your point on you can't half, you didn't say this, but I took it as you can't half-arse it, unfortunately. You have to come in and give it your full. I would still encourage people to come and do taster days and come and dip your toe, even if it is delivering 3 hours a week in a specialist T-level or a specialist construction built environment course, right? Dip your toe in, but don't do it a day or two a week. Come and do 5 days, but come and give us a guest spot. Come and give us something to feel the passion of FE. But definitely, I see your point on that, because it is that job that consumes your passion. It takes your energy and it gives you stuff back for it, for sure, the reward.
I totally agree. And I'm not saying there isn't a position or a place for that at all. And I think that idea of people sort of dipping their toe in and getting involved that way, I think that's really valid, and we'd really welcome that. I think that the point I'm making is, I think people who are thinking of maybe doing it alongside their sort of core skill or their sort of core role, their industry role, and balancing teaching and FE, you need to do it with your eyes open. Especially given we're in a world now where people want more work-life balance.
Massively.
You know, people don't want to be working 60 hours a week. People would rather be working sort of 4 days a week or having more flexibility. You're not going to get that if you're balancing a role in industry and a role in teaching. It's not going to happen.
That is an interesting question. What do you reckon the biggest misconception is of people getting into colleges? What do they think about it? Like, so say someone applies for a job. What do you think they're thinking? Well, actually, no, FE's like that, so I don't want to apply. What would it be?
That's a really good question. I think one of the big misperceptions of FE is how complex it is.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people think it's relatively straightforward. And I don't just think that's people potentially looking to work in FE. I think that's so many stakeholders, particularly people who have never set foot in a college or their educational journey didn't take them through a general further education college. I think the surprise is, my goodness, the amount of stuff that goes on a day-to-day basis. And of course, the core business of a college will always be, and rightly be, delivering high quality education and training to young people, adults, apprentices, etc. So much that more goes on about that in terms of the community engagement, in terms of employer responsiveness, and we do so many things like workshops to employers, bringing them into these things like demystifying AI, cyber. We have a fantastic initiative here, which has run for many years now, called the Community Partnership, where we coordinate a lot of the third sector organisations in the community and bring them into the college to work with young people and adult learners, but look at how can our young people, adult learners, add value to your organisations. And people think, just thought you'd run some courses. Yeah. you didn't do all this other stuff besides. So I think that would be the thing, that the sheer complexity of what goes on a day-to-day basis is huge.
That's really insightful as to the role that FE plays. We see the broader picture. They do so much. There's so much going on. But what's that, if you could distill it down, what's that simple misconception? What's that thing that just stops people from hitting apply, that maybe confuses them or maybe they don't understand? How would you demyst that?
I think it goes back to what you said earlier, and we were talking about FE being seen, unfortunately, as that sort of second chance, that sort of second chance offer, the place where people go to if your local sixth form doesn't want you, if you've been rejected. And I think there's sometimes a perception that FE colleges are just full of people who are disengaged, who don't want to learn, who are there because they haven't got any choice to be there. Yeah. They're there if they're 16 to 18, for example. Well, they're there because the government says you have to be in some form of education and training. And I think the surprise is, there's always a little bit of that. But you get that in sixth forms, you get that in schools, you get that in universities. Actually, the vast majority of people here are here because they're so committed to what they want to achieve in terms of their educational journey, in terms of the career they want to do, the job they want to get. And I think that is a big surprise, that seeing people so passionate about being a bricklayer, being a beauty therapist, doing A-levels, which common misconception is it's colleges are all vocational. Of course, many of them are, but we do a whole range of things. We do A-levels, we do university courses, adult education. And I think that is the thing that surprises a lot of people. One, the sheer range of what we do, but also the fact that, my goodness, it's people here who are passionate and committed about learning.
They share that with the learner, right? I'm sure week 1, September, right, we finished enrolment. I'm sure there's a bunch of students there going, what am I doing here, right? New building, new place, can't even find their way around the college, right? It's a maze. But they're in, and then over the course of a month, maybe over the course of 2, they get to engage with passionate educators. They get to see the systems in place. I'm sure by the end of October, those people that didn't really want to be there probably are finding other homes to be in, but also those that are there are committed to it, and the outcomes are going to be great for them. And I think that is a massive misconception. I think people do think it's a bunch of, in the government's phrasing, not my own, needs. And that's not true, right? All around you see passion, creativity. You see engagement from learners. And I think you're totally right. That's a massive misconception. Which brings me neatly on. What's your proudest moment in FE? What's the thing that you got most excited for that happened?
That's too many to mention. Too many to mention. I think I have to go back and say one of the proudest moments was actually joining this college. given my own background and history of it as a young person. And, to come back and lead the institution, that benefited me, that put me on my educational journey. I had fantastic teachers when I was here. It couldn't have been a prouder moment to come back and lead the organisation that had benefited me so much. But I think I would say possibly that the next proudest moment for me was, and I have to bring it to Ofsted unfortunately, but I do it for a reason. So in 2022 we had our first full inspection since going through 2 mergers in 3 years. And that's our context, by the way. I say to everybody, our context, I'm digressing for a moment, but I said the context of TSCG is 2 mergers in 3 years in a global pandemic.
Yep.
Every organisation had a global pandemic. Not many organisations either side of the global pandemic did 1 merger and then another one straight after.
And that was Cheadle.
So Stockport College,
Yep.
first of all, to form the Trafford College Group.
Yep.
And then in 2021, Cheadle Marple Sixth Form College joined the group, and then we rightly said can no longer be called the Trafford College Group because we serve as many young people, adults, businesses in Stockport as we do Trafford, so Trafford and Stockport College
Yep.
Group. Anyway, that's a slight digression. But the history, of course, was Stockport College, unfortunately, had been through many years of challenges in terms of its financial position and a succession of Ofsted Grade 4s.
I remember some of them.
And Cheadle Marple College was unfortunately in financial trouble, hence the merger, and was unfortunately at the time graded as requires improvement by Ofsted. And in 2022, to receive an overall judgment of good, given what this college we are sat in now, Stockport College, had gone through, given what Cheadle and Marple Sixth Form College had gone through, it was one of the proudest moments of my career for the people of Stockport, for the people of Cheadle and Marple. For them to have finally got that off their backs was huge. And we genuinely had people in tears. We genuinely had people in tears because just because we had finally got over that hurdle and we could finally put that to bed and move forwards as a college group.
You gave me 2 answers there, both of which were connected. And I think the only thing that I'm going to pick at is you said lead the college. And I personally feel, and I'm sure it's echoed in many others, help the college to thrive. I don't know of many people that have joined their home college and then taken that college from 24 million turnover to 60 million turnover in the period of time that you've done that. So I guess if you were to answer that question again, I definitely would throw the word thrive in there, because you're thriving for the community and in your role, and I think that is an incredibly impressive career. So, not to blow any smoke, but I think lead and thrive is definitely there. But well done on grade 2 and well done to the college, and I think that's brilliant.
Thank you.
So, thanks for that. I feel like I know a lot more about you. I know a load about your history. We're going to move on now, and we're going to talk about Trafford and Stockport College's culture and values. So, can you describe them to me? What are your values?
So we have 5 values: ambitious, respectful, collaborative, resilient, and inclusive. They're pretty standard. I mean, I have to say, if you were to go in most colleges, you would see similar words. Ambitious is probably one most colleges use. Inclusive, respect. So they are a little bit sort of samey. But and one thing I would say on that, we had an ex-principal, I won't say who, not at this college, but an ex-college principal came and did a really inspiring talk to all our leaders and managers a few years ago, because their college, I think, really pushes the boat on culture and values, really good. And they said, what are your values? And we said them, and she just said in front of everybody, they're crap. and to be fair, in some ways, I think she was absolutely right, because they are much of a muchness. But the important thing is what's underneath. and for us, do you know what? I'm a big believer in what used to be called the Runshaw way. And the Runshaw College way was, of course, values drive behaviours. I'm not saying the entire Runshaw way I would have subscribed to, but the values drive behaviours bit, I think, is absolutely spot on. And for us, that's what we absolutely try and live and breathe. How do those values drive how we behave and work together, both in terms of colleagues and students and our wider stakeholders? How does that drive how we interact? And one of the ways we try and do that, for example, is each half term, we always have a particular focus on one of the values with our colleagues and our students. And we've got into a bit of a rhythm with it now. So obviously at the moment we're challenging ourselves is how do we keep it fresh? How does it just not sort of become the sort of norm? But an example of that would be, first half of the autumn term, big focus on inclusive. Lots of students are new to the college. Welcome to the college community. You know, everybody has a place here. How do we focus on inclusion? What we always find is when you get to October half term, particularly some of the 16-year-olds who have joined us for the first time, they've found their way around a bit. They've sort of tested the boundaries a little bit, and then a very small minority, of course. And this is young people are young people. Young people are young people. We tend to find they start to challenge us a little bit. So then we go to respectful. So it's just a reminder about, you know, this is what we expect from all of us being part of the college community in terms of respecting each other. Then we get to January, and it's January, it's dark, it's miserable, attendance starts to drop, motivation drops, you might get an odd number of students who sort of struggling, is this the right thing that I've done coming to this course, can I do it, etc. So we go to resilient. So again, we do a lot of stuff on how can we help you, how can we remind you about where to get support, how can we help you help yourself. And then not surprisingly, one final example, when we get to the sort of home straight of the college year, it's ambitious. So, you know, remember what your target grade was, do your best in your exam or your final assessment. We're here to help you. What can we do to get you over that finishing line? So we try and we try to live and breathe it throughout the cycle of a college year.
I don't know if you can tell, but I am amazed at the simplicity and effectiveness of that. Like, I'm sure the camera can see my face just going, that's so, I don't mean to belittle it, it's so simple, right? But I've never heard that before. And matching your values to where people are at a time in their lives when you need it most, and then driving that home. I think people are going to borrow that one. You've said that, and I think that's going to fly.
I wouldn't say it's perfect. You know, we have 900 colleagues, 13,000 students. So how do you make the values resonate with everybody? It's difficult. But one thing that I would say, so in the student survey we do every year, one of the questions is, do you understand the college values? Another question we ask them is, do you think colleagues and fellow students live those values? And on the question of do you know the college values, we get a higher percentage responding yes to the question of do you know what British values are? Now Ofsted
don't know how Ofsted feel about that.
Might not like that. It's quite a high percentage, by the way, but it's an even higher percentage. It's over 90% of students in that survey will say yes, but we know the college values.
To raise that principle, it's because they're a bit crap, right? It's because they've been heard before. But actually, when you talk about culture, and this is what people don't understand, if I say describe culture, they go, no idea. It's because culture is values and behaviours.
Yeah.
Your values could be anything, right? It could be, I can't think of a silly expression, but you could call them ketchup, brown sauce and mayonnaise. But what does ketchup, brown sauce and mayonnaise mean to you? Well, actually, it means that we have to respect each other. So whilst we ketchup, we're kind, right? Whatever, but it doesn't matter. The word isn't the important bit. It's how it's lived throughout that organisation. But going back to those values, which I think are brilliant, so I'm sorry to whoever this principal is, but I disagree strongly. How did you identify those values? How did they come to be your values?
So actually it was it was back in the day of Trafford College where we originally came up with the values as a major concept and a driver for culture. And it was my predecessor, Leslie Davis, fantastic principal, an amazing individual. When she became the principal, she absolutely drove this idea of values. Because if I'm honest, before Leslie joined us, the idea of sort of culture and values, Trafford College did many things very well. I don't think that was high up on the agenda. And Leslie transformed that. You know, she absolutely challenged us and said, no, this is so important. So she led a consultation exercise across the college. She did a staff conference, all sorts of quirky, fantastic activities were going on. But the whole point was trying to arrive at an agreement on 5 values. And we did that. And then when we merged, rightly or wrongly, when we merged with Stockport College, we said, let's not throw everything up in the air. So we kept the values. But then when I became principal, we did a kind of values refresh just to test, are they still resonant? And we invited feedback. We got some feedback. A lot of people didn't, to be fair. Hopefully that's because they thought, no, they're good enough as they are, but we did get some feedback. And at the time, one of the 5 values was bold.
Okay.
And in the context, so when I became principal, it was in the midst of COVID. And people were sort of saying, bold isn't resonating with us anymore. But the idea of what we are going through, our internal context of mergers and our external context of what was happening with the pandemic, there was a real focus on how do we get through this and support each other. So resilient ended up replacing bold as a result of that consultation. So it was very much driven by the views of colleagues originally. The refresh was done through asking people, what do you think? Are they still relevant? And as a result of that, one of them got changed. We may well in the future revisit that, and I think you should. I think you should always refresh your values in your context and say, look, does this still work, or are they crap? Do we need to change them? So
that's really interesting, because you've taken it and kept it and stuck with it. To me, I thought values were quite a new concept. You would have believed that it's a modern thing. Values have been present in all of our lives since day one. They are called lived values, and I think probably what that principal was saying, rather than crap, was probably that these are a bit generic, but they're what you live.
Absolutely.
They're what you go through every day, and they're what you need to get by in the working world. For me, I think those values would serve you well in any business. I mean, our values are GROW, which is grit, resilience, optimism, well-being.
Yeah, brilliant.
Right, which it's lucky it spells GROW because it's super simple to remember. GROW with Talentia, but what I find is that actually they have to mean something. It sounds like they're carried and stuck with you because they were embedded here. Yeah. And then when people join the organisation, they sign up to adhere to that values-based code. Yeah. So you touched on something there. You brought Stockport into the group. So that must have presented some challenges about how you embed and drive that culture. So rather than talk about how you embed and drive it across the group, how did you do it with the newly merged college? Because in some would perceive that you've imposed those values upon that college, but I'm sure that there was another way around it.
I think so the merger with Stockport College, I mean, was it in some ways it was a very difficult merger, in other ways not, because of where the college was at. And I think actually there was a lot of synergy in the cultures between the two colleges already. Yeah. General further education colleges, we live and breathe diversity of provision to so many students, that there were so many synergies already between it. It was not difficult from that point of view. It was not difficult. And I think one of the key things is, how do you take people with you rather than doing things to them? And you can't always get that right. You as much as you'd like to, you can't always get that right. And so it proved with Stockport College. But I think we shared a common set of values anyway, without taking the words aside. Whatever words you would use, those concepts of being inclusive, of working collaboratively, of being ambitious, they absolutely resonated through both organisations. And so from that point of view, it wasn't so difficult. The more difficult merger was Cheadle and Marple Sixth Form College, because it was a sixth form college. It was a different designated legal entity. It was a very different culture, and I think our challenge has been, and to some extent is still, winning hearts and minds from an organisation that was very different and had a very different culture to a general further education college. But one example of ways to win hearts and minds, and this wasn't done deliberately, it was done through merit, is the person who in the leadership team is responsible for quality and performance across the whole of TSCG came from Cheadle and Marple Sixth Form College. The person working with him who is responsible for teaching, learning and assessment across this entire college group, 13,000 students, came from Cheadle and Marple Sixth Form College. Because the whole point of us with mergers was, just because Trafford was perceived to be the takeover partner because it was more resilient financially at the time, doesn't mean we were any better.
No.
And the talent and benefit from colleagues at Stockport College and Sheila Marple Sixth Form College has enriched us so much. Has absolutely, and to see now key members of leadership driving the whole education purpose of this organisation, having come from Sheila Marple Sixth Form College, hopefully says what we are all about.
So we bring it in, bring the talent in, celebrate the cultures, recognise the cultures, see the shared synergy, drive that and channel it. Can you give me a couple of ways that you channel culture? So you talked about the values at different seasons and different terms. Is there anything that you do a staff newsletter? How do you engage with the workforce? Any tips there?
Yeah, maybe we throw the kitchen sink at it, to be honest. So very quickly, what do we do? So we have a staff newsletter called Connect.
Yep.
This started out during, so when I joined as a principal, or became a principal in COVID, we did what was called it became a daily briefing.
Yep.
So we started with a daily briefing because you had to turn on a sixpence in terms of what was going on. And it went down really well with people. It did go down because people were well informed, we know what's going on. Then obviously coming out of that, we turned it into a weekly briefing. Now it's actually a fortnightly briefing. But it's actually done through marketing, and they do it on our intranet. It's really engaging, lots of good content on there. And I think we've got the right balance now between not overloading people with information, but making sure people have regular updates on what is going on across what is a really diverse and complex college group. I supplement that with every month I do what's called the Principal's Blog.
Yep.
Now the CEO's blog, but the blog. And basically what that does is it gives people an update in terms of what's happening in the policy environment, but gives my spin on it. Yep. And do you know what? Some people, they're not really interested in that, that's fine. But for some people, they really are. So it just creates that transparency of what is happening externally and what does that mean for our college group. Well, then what we do is we have several other things. So because sort of written newsletters, they're very impersonal, aren't they? So what we do is once a half term, we have like an all staff webinar where myself and other members of the leadership team, we just give everybody an update in terms of what is going on across the college group, key messages, and then we do a Q&A at the end. It's a webinar, so obviously we control the sort of questions and answers in terms of what we say in the live feed. But what we do is after that webinar, every single question that came in, we publish it and we give a response to. So obviously in the live feed, we can't answer everything.
Yep.
But we make a commitment for full transparency that whatever is asked, you will get an answer. And you know, particularly a couple of years ago, our sector, the country went through a tough time, didn't it? It went through a tough time. So some of the questions we got were pretty challenging, and you understood where people were coming from. But we published it. You know, you've said this, and this is our response to it. If that wasn't enough, what we do once in the autumn term, because the autumn terms are really full on one. So for each of our main college sites, the 5 main college sites, myself and the leadership team, we go around and do a face-to-face campus briefing.
Roadshows, yeah.
So we do it as we sort of give a key update. We try to make a little bit of it campus specific as well. So what's really going on at Stockport College? What are our future plans? What are we doing at Sheila College, etc. And then it gives an open forum for people to ask questions. But if that wasn't enough, we do what's called the roadshow. You mentioned the word roadshow. We do a roadshow, and we do that at department level. And what we do is we go and sit down with teams in their departments, and we just have an open. We go with no agenda. We don't have any slides. We don't have any input. We go, just talk to us. What is going on? What is happening? What's going well? What isn't going well? What can we do if there's anything you think we should address or improve? Couple of years ago, they were tough conversations, just because of workforce challenges, 2 mergers in 3 years, post-COVID, all that. There were some really tough conversations, and you would sit there, and in some cases meetings went very well. In some cases, some real challenges, you just get things absolutely thrown at you. And it was the right thing to do, because you have to listen to people. You have to meet people with where they were at. So we sat and we listened, and we would give responses in the meeting. We would follow up every meeting with, this was all the points you raised. This is our response to it. Obviously, some things, quickly we can get onto that. Didn't know that was happening. We can sort that. Some things, well, you might need to give us a bit longer. And some things, only a minority, but some things well, we might just have to agree to disagree. That there's probably nothing we can do about that, and that is unfortunately the way the world is. We've kept those going over the last 3 years. And it's funny, the other day I was just remarking to one of my colleagues, we've done a few over the last few weeks, and they're much shorter meetings.
Less problems.
And they're much friendlier meetings. And it's like, have you got any? No. And it's like, well, you know, everybody's pretty happy. And most teams, you always get some things going on. And that's the nature, you know, 900 colleagues, you're always going to get some challenges and some people who have got some concerns. I get that. But the whole dynamic of those meetings has shifted.
It hurts to start, but the pain subsides. You practice it, you stay consistent, you give them a place to voice, and over time, the less and less.
But and of course, when you're sat in this role, and I think more than any other role, you do take it on more, because you know that I always call it the weight of responsibility. At the end of the day, I'm accountable for 900 colleagues and 13,000 students. I'm responsible for their well-being. I have a duty of care to all those individuals. That anybody thinking of being a CEO, by the way, it is a big weight of responsibility. So when you're sat there in those meetings and there's a lot going on, you go out there and you think, you know, am I failing these people? But it's absolutely the right conversation to have. And in a lot of cases, people just feel so much better for having had that opportunity. They just want the opportunity.
Just to be heard.
Just to be heard, absolutely.
That's where you said we did things so powerful, because it recognises the voice and responds to it. And I'd echo your statement. Being a CEO is hard. So we're, as an agency, indirectly responsible for circa 800 teachers at any one time.
Yeah.
And that comes with it a burden, right? You've got to do right by as many people as possible. And when those people span 210 colleges, it presents an interesting, you've got to look after people, and just giving them a voice, giving them a place to talk, and then giving them information goes a long way. And what I take from what you've just said there is that you have to start, right? If you're not doing anything today, start, and yes, it's going to hurt. They won't throw eggs at you. You might want to, but they won't throw eggs at you, but you just start, and then you do. Yeah. And it'll get easier and easier with time. And I think that's a really good takeaway for people.
But a final point on it, if I may, is it's not all about sort of going and having conversations and talking about what's wrong with the world. In a lot of cases, what's right with the world as well, and what's going well. But a good example is, so tomorrow is Employee Appreciation Day nationally. We're not doing anything tomorrow because so many people now on fractional contracts don't work on a Friday. We're going to make a big thing of it next week.
Yep.
And we started this last year. We did something very similar last year, where what we did was, myself and members of the leadership team, we have appreciation cards, handwritten, and we just go out around the group and we photo bomb people. And these are people that either teams we've identified that, you know what, let's just go and show our appreciation to them. But our middle managers as well, our heads of department, they sort of identify to us, you know, this person's made a real difference over the past sort of month or term or whatever. And we just go around, followed by marketing, and we just either go into the classroom where they are or the office where they are, and we just say a big thank you, give them the appreciation card, get the photo taken. And it's simple things like that I think that make a difference.
If we do something similar, we call it Standard Star. So at the end of a month, every colleague gets a chance to voice based on a value. We've only got 4, which makes it a bit easier. Based on a value, who upheld that value best and why. So then at the end of the month, someone wins, they get a small prize and they get celebrated. They get shouted out for that particular value, whether it's resilience and going through a hard time, whether it was well-being and helping someone look after themselves. Because I think well-being in isolation, but actually your colleagues working together, those small things, that tiny little gesture, which is huge to that individual, I think that's incredibly special. And all of the things you there said, they take time. So I'm just going to ask this question, though I think I know the answer, because it sounds like you spend a lot of time on it. How important is culture to the success of Trafford and Stockport College Group?
Oh, incredibly. And not least because of the mergers we've gone through. But putting that aside, there's this famous phrase, isn't it? Is it culture eats strategy for breakfast? And it's so true. So much so that we actually we measure culture. And we work with an organisation called the Pacific Institute, who I used to work with at my last college. So I've spent better part of 15, 16 years working with the Pacific Institute, and they are really focused on organisational development, culture and leadership. And one of the things that I said to myself when I became principal of this organisation, because there's got to be some benefit to being the principal. You've got to be able to have the luxury of making
one or two would be nice,
some decision.
right?
Yeah, you've got to be able to make some decision. And I absolutely committed that we were going to engage with them to basically drive that organisational culture piece, what we call one college group culture, because of those 2 mergers in 3 years, because of that sheer complexity and pace of change. How do we try and get everybody aligned to those values? How do we try and get everybody aligned to what we want to achieve together? And using them as a vehicle to do that has been fantastic. So what they did at the start of the process is they actually measured our culture.
Yep.
So they do what they call a sort of culture survey. And actually, and this is going back to, we started it literally just post the merger with Cheadle Marple Sixth Form College. They sort of measure whether you're a constructive culture or a defensive culture. We actually just slipped into the constructive culture.
Brilliant.
So that was it's a good starting point.
Indeed, yeah.
What I'm really nervous about, of course, is when this summer, so we'll have done 3 years going through their programme, we'll have had well over two-thirds of our colleagues will have gone through the programme they do. They do the survey again. So I'm hoping it's gone the right way and not backwards. But that's how much we think it's important. Measure it, engage with a third party to really support us to drive that. Try and live and breathe it every day, because it's what makes things work.
It's what my business is. So one of the things that we do under our Talented Talent Services banner is culture. We try to deeply understand it with you. We try to help you measure it. We try to help you understand it. And the response we're getting is, yeah, we need it and we want it. And there's so many passionate leaders that care so much about culture. It really can't be ignored. And I loved what you said there. Because one of my questions is, how does culture differ from campus to campus? Don't answer it, right? Because that one college culture answers the question that I was going to ask. But I almost laughed to myself then, because I thought about the stupid values, or whatever this person had called them. And I thought, yeah, but they're simple, so you can share them and they can be embedded no matter the campus, right? All of your campuses will share in your 5 values. I'm really sorry if this person watches this podcast and I'm laughing at them, but it doesn't differ campus to campus. It has a huge impact on workforce. Your people feel it. It's recognised. Honestly, incredibly impressive stuff. So that brings us neatly on to probably my last question around culture. Who's in charge of culture at Trafford and Stockport College Group?
Again, it might seem a little bit cliche, but my view is, well, everybody has a stake in culture. And you talk about culture and leadership go hand in hand. So leadership, yes, there is a formal leadership, but then everybody takes a leadership responsibility. If you're a teacher, for example, you are leading learning. You are leading teaching and learning with your group of students, and what you do with those students and how you interact with those students drives culture. And regardless of your role, whether you are a teacher or curriculum support, or our colleagues we call enabling colleagues in business support roles, you have a stake in culture, and your interactions on a day-to-day basis will determine what the culture of the organisation is, for good or for bad.
The standard you walk past is the standard you accept is one of those really important embedding tools when it comes to culture.
Yeah.
It's, you see it, say something. Yeah. Do you think you've got that at the college? Do you think you've got the culture where people will call people out on behaviours that don't align?
I think we're still on a journey.
That's okay.
I think we're still on a journey. But then maybe my standard is I would want everybody. Yeah. So, would I ever be satisfied on that? And given the role I think culture plays, the importance I put on it, maybe I'd never be satisfied with that. And I think in the main people do. Yeah. I think in the main people do. But I think you should never be complacent about it. You should continuously look to drive standards. And I think that one of the organisational challenges, I don't just think we have, is I think that post-COVID hangover of actually people maybe feeling less confident to challenge. And I think that's one of the things we have to rebalance, which is, first and foremost, we want our colleagues and our students to thrive, absolutely. But at the same time, we want the highest standards.
To thrive in the right way.
have to
Useless,
thrive in the
useless
right-
to grow on an unstable base. Great. I was talking to an interesting Deborah Gray over at Hull, and she said, growth for growth's sake is a waste of time. I want growth in the right areas. And so having that connection to it and making sure things are done the right way and that we progress in the right manner, vital to success. Just going like that, crack on, doesn't work. We have to share in it.
Yeah.
Right, that's the end of the segment on culture. And I really, there were a lot to recap there for someone that was listening to this. Some great takeaways. So thank you so much for sharing that. Right, so that really neatly leads us in, right, into we finished the culture piece, and now we need to talk about what we offer to our employees. So I call it employee value proposition, and that is what your benefits are. So what are the top 3 benefits that you offer to your employees?
So I would say the first. So I'm going to come in a moment to sort of more hard sort of benefits. Well, I'll start with authenticity. I think one of the main benefits we offer people wanting to work here is we are, I believe, a genuinely authentic employer. You can be your authentic self. We are transparent. We are open. We talked a lot about culture and the culture we create here. We are a community, and being part of something, as I said at the start of the podcast, transforming lives for the better. There is so much in that, and I'll give you two quick examples. So the first one is when we had a real torrid time a couple of years ago, still having some challenges around teachers of electrical installation. There you go. Your face says it all. A couple of years ago, we through the sort of trade association, we sent out a sort of general sort of plea, advert, call it what you want, about come in and talk to us about careers in education. We'd love to have a conversation about potentially how you could get involved in FE. We had quite a few people turn up, so a physical event, quite a few people turned up, had some really interesting chats. And we had sort of comments like, well, I'm really interested in this because, I'm sick of crawling into small spaces as an electrician. And, my body's getting it. This guy was 40 years old. He said, I'm getting on a bit now. He's like 10 years younger than me. So I'm looking for something a bit different to do. This other guy said, you being an electrician, there's a lot of benefits to it. He says, but my biggest problem is just people just don't pay me. I invoice people and people just don't pay me on time. So one thing I can guarantee is on the 25th of every month, our payroll manager ensures you get paid. But alongside those stories, there was real interest in this idea of actually, I want to give something back. I've got great skills, great knowledge. Now I feel it's the time to give something back to the next generation. So that kind of, hand in glove, I think, that authenticity, being your authentic self, but at the same time, being part of something and really giving something back. The other example I would give on that there around the sort of authenticity is I do what's called the sort of principal and CEO's welcome lunch. So it used to be called the corporate induction. Nobody came to it. So we changed it to lunch, and of course
Everyone turned up. No such thing as a free lunch.
So this is new colleagues. And one of the things I always ask them is, so I ask them to introduce themselves. What's your name? What's your role? How long have you been here? Because by the time they get to lunch, because we're here quite a while, we always have a bit of a conversation about sharing a fun fact. But I ask them this really important question. Why here? I said, because let's be honest, I don't have to be here. You don't have to be here. We all probably have to be in work. None of us have probably got the luxury not to be in work, but none of us have to be here. So what drove you here? And I get some amazing responses. I get respect. And quite a lot of, I've got a family member who's been here. I was a student here, like me, lots of them, students who've come back to work for us. But when I did it last week, and last week's, some of the responses got surpassed anything. I came out of, how challenging the job is. There are not many days you come out absolutely buzzing as a CEO. Well, let me tell you, on this day, I thought you couldn't have scripted some of this stuff. It was amazing. And one of the colleagues said, because you were honest. They said, because when I went through the interview, you were completely honest about some of the challenges I was going to face in the role, in the very particular role I was applying for. And you had a very honest conversation about, there's these things that need doing. It's going to be a bit challenging at first because we need to do X, Y, and Z. And they said it was so refreshing. He said I wasn't sold a false, and She said that authenticity has just come through time and again since I joined this college. So that I think was just amazing.
We call that energy matching in recruitment. It is the energy of the leader, the hiring manager, the establishment, and how that translates to the candidate experience. And sometimes you can have a fantastic, energetic brand. The interview experience doesn't match, or the onboarding experience doesn't match. So one thing that I really love seeing is when it's consistent. You don't have to be great. You do not have to stand out. If you are consistent, you would attract people. If you sing and dance and say you're the best thing in the world since sliced bread, and then your interview process doesn't match, you're in trouble there. But if you say, yeah, we're all right. Do you know what? We do our stuff well. We've got a good culture, a nice place to work. And they interview and it's a good culture, a nice place to work. Success.
Yeah.
That's what you get.
Yeah.
People feel sold to in other areas. So
But
one main benefit, why do people, other than the feeling they get and the job satisfaction, what's one of the best benefits you offer?
So if I went, so I will talk about hard benefits as well, because I think that's what people want to hear. First of all, we are very competitive on pay.
Yep.
We are very competitive on pay, not least for teaching staff. And, there are trade-offs with that. So interestingly, in terms of the size of our workforce, the sheer numbers of people we have, I was surprised recently to say it's probably not as big as you would expect given the £60 million organisation. We might be relatively lean, but we pay people well. The second thing linked to that is, and again, talking specifically teachers here, we have deliberately kept our annualised hours down. So again, we are probably one of the most competitive colleges for annualised teaching hours because we believe quality trumps quantity.
Yep.
And there's got to be a balance because we've got to be financially sustainable. We've got to be efficient. But I do think we've really managed to achieve a good balance of that. But sort of year on year, that commitment that we will keep teaching hours low in comparison to the rest of the sector. And let me say, in FE, they are a lot lower than schools. And
yeah. And so, everyone's going on about the pay rise, the 9K gap, but actually we do get some less teaching hours and also some of the facilities. I mean, we're sat today in your Igloo core engine, which is what it says on the screen. I believe it's a virtual classroom, right?
A cave, yeah.
A cave, right? And that is cutting edge technology. I doubt you'd find many schools in the country that are able to deliver digital education in such a manner.
But one thing colleges haven't been short of in recent years, I must say, is capital. So yes, we have an ongoing debate with government about revenue, and as you said, there is that gap between FE teachers' pay and school teachers' pay, and that needs to be addressed. But in terms of capital and being able to invest in facilities, there has been no shortage of that, and so it enables us to invest in great facilities. And then the other thing that I would say that makes us competitive is we do really embrace the culture of work-life balance and flexibility. And again, in education, that isn't easy, and there is a balance to be struck because, as I say to my peers, let's not forget that we are an on-site provider of education and training. On any given day, Monday to Friday, thousands upon thousands of people are walking through our doors and on our sites. So we can't embrace fully remote learning.
Nope.
And you can't teach from your kitchen. You can't lead an organisation from your bedroom. You've got to be on site. But we can balance that, and we do balance that. So an example of that is we have a block timetable system. When class is finished, last one of the days about 3:45, do we expect people to be on site, present in an office? No, because we know people work hard. We know, take teaching, it's not a 9 to 5 job. And we know people do take things home, but then actually we need to trust people to do their job and not have presenteeism. And actually, yes, you come in to do what you need to do, but then actually if you need to get off at 4 o'clock, or you need to come in at 9:30 in the morning because you've got to drop off with the kids, we can support that. And one of the things we've introduced is what's called a right to switch off policy.
Okay.
So one of the things that I found in my career, and this is just organisations per se, isn't it? Conversations carry on over email late into the night. people emailing on a Saturday and Sunday. I've seen it throughout my career. Leaders especially feeling obliged to keep a conversation going on a Saturday to show that they're on it. It's not heroic.
No.
It's not effective, and it ain't respectful.
Yeah.
And I have a very simple rule myself. 6 o'clock on a Friday. If staff and students are all safe, if the buildings are still standing, anything else can wait till Monday morning. Yes, safeguarding and business continuity emergencies. Somebody knows where to get hold of me. I know where to get hold of others, but that's a rarity. And we've actually now extended that across the organisation to say you have a right to switch off.
Yep.
If your manager emails you in the evening, you are not obliged to respond to it. If they email you on a Saturday or Sunday, you are not obliged to. You have a right to switch off.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a bad person. Sunday night, love to send an email me. I've discovered delayed send, not a problem anymore. Open my laptop on Monday morning, all my emails go out the door like I intended it, but I got my Sunday thinking time. But before that, I used to write at the top of the email, don't read this till Monday, right? Because actually I don't need a response. I'm brain dumping. I'm doing my thing in my time.
Yeah.
I don't want to impact you negatively.
Yeah.
And you do have a right to switch off. I don't think in the UK we need that as a law. I think organisations that recognise it, speak about it and sort it, do the right thing anyway. So it sounds like lots of what we do is geared around people. Of course it has to be as a college. How do we support people's progression? How do we get them up? What programmes do we run? How do we invest in people?
So one of the things we're in the process of doing at the moment is establishing what we call career families. And it was interestingly, it was my wife who sparked the idea from an organisation she used to work for when she said to me, so in our organisation, every single role, there was a career path for it. You knew that you were starting at that role, but you could see a map of where you could go and progress to in the organisation. And then, of course, it sounds very simple, doesn't it? And that's something we've not had in place, but it's something we're introducing. But then crucially alongside that is, well, that's great, I can see that map, but where's the how? So if I want to go from there to there, how do I do it? And of course, it is challenging. So, you can't always provide opportunities for progression for everybody when they want it. There has to be a role available. But one of the things we do is, for many years now, we've run a programme, which is a middle leadership programme. We've done it, I'll give a shameless plug for him, even though I think he's retired or about to retire. John Thedham, who's he just recently stepped down as the chair of Kendal College.
Okay.
But for many years worked on leadership programmes with the Association of Colleges. And since 2017, he's had a relationship with us where he comes in and delivers this leadership development programme for middle managers. But then what we did was, we said, well, why should it just be for people who are in formal management positions? What about people who are aspiring to be there? I mean, there might not be a position available just yet, but actually make the programme open to those colleagues, and then they can start to get the knowledge and the skills so that when the role does become available, they're putting themselves in a good position to be successful.
Your managers act as if, right? You're managed upwards. It's let's sit you in the shoes. A platform for growth.
Yeah.
So, in your experience, if you could think of one reason, I think you talked about it a little bit, but what's the one reason that people come and join Trafford and Stockport College Group?
I think, you'd expect me to say this, I think we have a good reputation. I do think we have a good reputation. And it's interesting. So I asked that question, didn't I? Earlier I said to you, I asked that question of all our colleagues when they come to the welcome lunch. And I say, why did you join us? What's the one reason? And I do think reputation comes out quite strong. There was one guy at the event I did last week, so I've applied 3 times to get into this college. He said, and third time lucky, he said, because it is your reputation. I wanted to work here. But I also think, and I'm not answering your question properly here because I'm giving you more than one reason, but I do think it's reputation, but I also think it's purpose.
Yep.
And I think people do genuinely, especially when you come into FE with your eyes open, you're here for the right reason, because you want to give something back, because you have a passion of working, whatever role it is, whether it's a teaching role or a support role, you have a passion of working in education and want to work with young people, with adults from all walks of lives, and you want to transform lives for the better.
So then why do they stay? If all of those things are great and that's why we get them through the door, why do they then stay at the college? What keeps people here?
I think because in the main we treat people right. Again, you're not going to get it right 100% of the time with 900 colleagues, 13,000 students. But I think we always strive to do the right thing by people. We always treat people right. We always treat people respectfully. And as I said earlier, when you asked about that sort of EVP and what are some of the benefits, I think we try and treat people well. Yeah. Whether that's be in terms of terms and conditions, whether it be in terms of flexibility, we genuinely try and treat people right and treat them well.
It's pretty simple. You make it sound. Most of these things sound quite simple. So, what's the one thing that you would do for your staff if you could? If money was no object, what would you give them?
Pay rise.
For everybody?
I would, yeah, absolutely. And I think, why do I say pay? I think it's the elephant in the room, isn't it? It is the elephant in the room because in the FE sector, let's be honest, compared to other parts of the education system, we have been left behind. We absolutely have been left behind. And I think people, there are so many reasons why they come and work in an organisation, but crucially, you become because you need to live and you need that financial security. And so for me, I think we do so much of the other stuff so well that I think the one thing is, if we could continue to give people a good pay rise every year, that is the one thing that I would really want. Yeah. But we need a government that supports that, and we need people to believe in us to do that. And I do think the sentiments are there, the warm words are there.
I think we've learned a lot about you today. I think that's a lot. We're running short on time. We're actually in a classroom, so unfortunately this session is going to have to come to a close without being able to ask you all of the leadership questions. But if you could give me one bit of advice to a future leader, what would that be?
Look after yourself. Look after yourself. Don't be a hero.
Yeah.
Because I think there's an expectation when you get into leadership that then all of a sudden you need to be doing 70 hours plus a week. You need to be on call 24/7. And there is an element of that because, as I said earlier, ultimately responsible for the amount of colleagues and students at TSCG is a responsibility I take very seriously every single day. But actually, the key thing is you've got to know your limitations. So you can't have all the answers. You can't do everything. And the other thing that I would say is as well, be true to yourself and believe in yourself. You won't win everybody over being a leader, particularly at the top. You can't please them all. And my proclivity is to be, I like seeing people happy, so I am a bit of a please you type person. That I know that's my, but I've challenged myself that you just can't live that life. You can't please everybody. And sometimes you've got to take unpopular decisions, but as long as they're the right decisions for your college community, its staff, its students, its stakeholders, then you have to stand by that. And the other thing I would say, and I'm giving you asked me for one bit of advice, and I'm giving you 20.
We'll take 3.
But the other thing that I would say is just ask for help.
I'd say that as well.
Being a principal and CEO can be a lonely position, but you've got there are great networks out there, great peer networks. Hopefully, if you're in the top position, you will have a good relationship with your chair. Yes, there is a dynamic of chair to CEO principal, but hopefully, and I'm very fortunate that we have a fantastic chair here who is very supportive. But you've got to be able to ask for help. So look after yourself and know your limitations. You're not a hero. No point dying young as a hero.
No.
Second thing is be true to yourself, and third thing is there's help out there. Ask for it if you need it.
Ask you, by the sounds of it. What an insightful view, not just into you and your experience, but into the college itself, into the into the real workings of it. And I thank you so much for sharing some of that tips and information. And I'm really excited for everyone to listen to this. So again, thank you. Thank you so much.
Guy, thank you so much, and great to join you. Thank you.